think about time right now, think of it like money and ask yourself the question, am I spending it? Am I investing it? Am I wasting it? And you can ask yourself those questions. It's easy to think about, money. Am I spending my money? Am I investing my money? Or am I wasting my money? And we know which one is best, right? It's when we invest it. But when it comes to time, ask yourself those same questions. Am I spending time? Like, am I just shelling it out here and there and everywhere on anything and everything? Am I investing it? Which means, am I intentional? Am I, being faithful with what I've been given? Or am I just wasting it?
Hey y'all, and welcome. You're listening to the Cowgirl Confessions podcast. I'm your host, Dakota Dawn Johnson, small town cowgirl with Southern roots, blazing a trail as a Midwest ranch wife, mama, and businesswoman. The mission of Cowgirl Confessions is to share the wonderfully wild and Western life stories of cowgirls from all walks of life. We'll talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to navigating careers, cowboys, kids, and cattle. Legendary cowgirl Dale Evans said it best. Cowgirl is a pioneer spirit, a special brand of American courage. The cowgirl faces life head on, lives by her own lights, and makes no excuses. Cowgirls take stands. They speak up. They defend the things they hold dear. A cowgirl might be a rancher, a barrel racer, a bull rider, or an actress. But she's just as likely to be a checker at the local Winn-Dixie, a full-time mother, a banker, an attorney, or an astronaut. If you're into wet saddle blankets, talks with God, buckets full of laughter, and the life lessons learned in the process, kick off your boots and settle in. I pray these stories encourage, empower, and give you just the leg up you need. Here's to embracing the cowgirl state of mind, no matter how wild and Western life may get along the way. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Cowgirl Confessions podcast. I am so excited to have my friend Sarah Neal with us again on this episode. Sarah is a wife, a mom, a business coach, and a beauty educator. And if you'd like to get to know Sarah a little bit more, please go back to our previous episode, episode 17, where you can hear more of her story. Episode, we're going to really get to the meat and potatoes of running your own business and what's been working for Sarah. Really, really excited to get to hear how she's managing it all. So, Sarah, I'm wondering, can you just kind of start by sharing with us? You're going to share with us your top 5 tips for time management today. And I'm wondering what helped you come up with these tips? Like, what helped you decide to be super intentional with time management? I'd love to kind of hear how it came about. And I've got my notepad ready and my pencil so I can take lots of notes today.
Awesome. Well, Dakota, thank you so much for having me back onto the podcast. I so enjoyed the time that we had together last time. And I've just gotten so much love from your listeners. Like, it just swells my heart. I'm a words of affirmation girl. And so just the fact that, people were touched by it and have reached out, what you're doing is it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you for sharing your gift with the world. And yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about my top 5 tips for time management today. But to answer your question, where that really came from was this last summer. So my company, we our fiscal year goes from July 1st to June 30th. So our kind of like new year, where all of our numbers reset and all of that is on July 1st. So I have tried to learn to make a practice of doing some year-end kind of like reflective thoughts, evaluation, that type of stuff of, what did I do well? What could I do better? Different questions like that. And one of the questions I asked myself this year was if I could master one skill, or if I could improve. I know I'm not going to master a skill probably in a year, but if I could improve on just one skill that would have the highest impact on my family and my business this year, what would that be? And that asking that question is really to kind of help myself, give me some focus and some intention of like, where would my time and my energy best be spent on growing myself personally, where it would have the highest impact? Like if I could just pick one thing. And so for me, the answer to that question was time management. And so I really, I'd studied time management before, being a business owner for 8 years. It was something that I've always been aware of, but it's also been something that I've really struggled with. And I'm telling you, going from no kids to kids, and then going from one kid who's kind of a toddler and a little more self-sufficient to two kids, and then all of a sudden being outnumbered, that was a major switch for me. And I'll be honest, in that time last summer, my son was only about 6 months old, Savvy was 3, and I was struggling. I was really struggling. It honestly, it did not, my expectations for what having another baby was going to be like with working a business from home. And then you throw COVID into the mix, and that was just like throwing a massive wrench into what I knew, and how I worked my business. But it turned out being a major blessing, of course, but it caused all of this. Like, I felt like I was like starting over from scratch, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is hard. This is hard. And one of the things that I had been taught early on in my career from one of my mentors was that if a woman finds herself, well, anybody, I guess, but specifically for what I do, if a woman finds herself unsuccessful in business, it's usually for one of 3 reasons: poor time management, poor money management, or poor attitude management, or emotional management, however you want to refer to it. And so those are kind of 3 checkpoints that whenever I'm struggling, I can kind of look back to those and go, okay, which of these areas right now am I really struggling in? Where can I improve? What can I do? And so for me at that time, it was time management. And so I really just asked the Lord, I was like, God, I want to dig in deep to this. I firmly believe that, sometimes we think that I think we think that the word of God is just spiritual and it's not practical, but I have learned that every question that I've come to God with, every circumstance, everything, there's an answer in his word for everything. And it may not be like the specific black and white thing, but when you look at the principles of, kingdom principles and the things that he talked about in the word of God and the stories that are told, and it is so applicable to what we do now. And so I, just kind of dove into this, started studying it, tried to get really intentional about it. And honestly, it's hard because depending on your personality, some of you guys that are listening, you might just be like, you are a natural planner and you love to write things down and you love to be prepared. And, if something is 3 weeks away, like you're ready 2 weeks early. Like that is my husband. He is a planner deluxe. Like he does not leave the house without a notepad and a piece of paper or his iPad. I mean, like he's got notes in his phone. Like he is he's so intentional, extremely proactive. I, on the other hand, by nature, am a little more fly by the seat of my pants. I'm a little more, I can manage chaos. I can thrive in chaos. Like I can, but honestly, whether that's your personality or not, that is no excuse to not manage your time well in business. And when you own a business, even not just owning a business, if you're listening to this and you're a work from home mom or you're a stay at home mom, like these principles are applicable to you. One of the mentors that I have is Pastor Craig Rochelle, and I highly recommend if you guys are in a leadership position or owning a business, that you check out his podcast. It's the Leadership Podcast. It's free. He just came out with a book that I'm really excited to read. But 1 or 2 of these time management tips that I'm going to give you guys are things that I've learned from listening to him and just gleaning from him. He's really passionate about leadership and business. And so one of the things that I've learned, just in listening to him and just going through some of his stuff, I will share a little bit with you guys. But when I was looking to the Word of God for some insight, he showed me some really cool things that I'm going to share with you guys today. But just really practical. So one of the things, God was really intentional. He cares how we spend our time. God cares how we spend our time. He also cares how we spend our money. and how we manage our money. And those are two things that are huge to him. So when it comes to time management, attitude management, money management, the Word of God actually has a lot to say about those things. So I hope that everything that I say today kind of points you back to the Word of God and to that truth. And I'll even give you a couple of scriptures that you can look up. But if you kind of think about time right now, think of it like money and ask yourself the question, am I spending it? Am I investing it? Am I wasting it? And you can ask yourself those questions. It's easy to think about, money. Am I spending my money? Am I investing my money? Or am I wasting my money? And we know which one is best, right? It's when we invest it. But when it comes to time, ask yourself those same questions. Am I spending time? Like, am I just shelling it out here and there and everywhere on anything and everything? Am I investing it? Which means, am I intentional? Am I, being faithful with what I've been given? Or am I just wasting it? Am I idle? Am I lazy? Am I not doing the things that I know I need to be doing? So those are some good questions to kind of ask yourself, just to kind of gauge of where you think you are on your time management skills. So the first thing I want to point you guys to is to the book of Proverbs. I know most of you guys have heard of the Proverbs 31 woman, right? Like, she's like, we know who she is. We've all heard that story. And I think sometimes, in the past, when I've heard that, I'm like, oh, my initial thought is she's a good wife. Her kids love her husband love her. She's so domestic. She's this and that. But you guys, when you look at the Proverbs woman, like, sometimes I feel like we think that our generation, we're the first to be like these mother hustlers. Okay. Like, we think like we invented this, like we're so, whatever, like this is our generation's thing. But I'm telling you guys, women have been working their butts off from the beginning of time, and they have been raising babies in the process. We're just the first ones to have a platform to gripe about it and to complain about it. Okay. So this has been going on forever. This is not some new concept of, this is the modern day woman. The things that we're facing, the struggles that we have of, trying to find harmony in motherhood and being a wife and managing our homes and running businesses or working. Those things are not, that's not new. And so what I loved about looking at Proverbs, and I would really encourage you guys to look to read this verse, like if you have a Bible app, or maybe you have an Amplified Bible in your home, but look at it from the Amplified Bible, because it really gives you so much insight and a lot more language around who she was practically and what she did. Some of the things, you guys, like she is a phenomenal example of what I would call, like, she is the OG boss babe. Okay. She is the ultimate boss babe. This is the woman that you would want to follow. This is the woman you'd want to listen to her podcast. You'd want to take her advice. You'd want to do her training course. And it's all laid out for us right there in scripture. But this woman was capable. She was intelligent. She was virtuous. She was an investor. She was an encourager. She had a strong work ethic. It tells us that she woke up early. She was a provider for her family. She was a leader in her community. She was a delegator. She knew how to delegate. Her priorities were clear and they were in line. She considered business opportunities. One of the things I love in verse 16, it talks about how she considered a field before buying it, but she considered it prudently. She wasn't rash about it. And she was not neglecting her present duties by assuming other duties. When you read that verse of scripture, is what it's talking about. So in other words, like, she was never going to take on more than what she knew she could handle. And if it affected the priorities that she had, if it didn't come into line with who she was and what she knew she was called to do, then she did not do it. She basically said no. And I thought that was really good. But she was, it also said that she was spiritually, mentally, and physically strong. And I'm like, wow, that is good, right? Those are the three parts of ourselves. We're not just a body. We're not just a mind. We're not just a spirit. We're body, mind, and spirit. And she obviously invested in herself in all three of these areas. Even to the point it talks about her physically being strong, like having strong arms. I'm like, that is so cool that God threw that in there. but she was generous. She cared for the poor, for the needy. She was prepared. She was confident. It talks about how she dressed, like she dressed for success. Her clothes were nice. They were expensive. She looked the part. She was dignified. She was joyful. She was wise. She was kind. It says that she gave good counsel and instruction. If you are, whether it's with your husband, your children, or women that you're leading, are you the person that gives good counsel and instruction? That's part of when we talk about being a business coach, or if that's part of what you do, like that's just another way of saying it. Business coaches are people who give good counsel and instruction. She set the tone for her household. She was skilled. That's another thing, I think sometimes we can overemphasize working or advancing a skill, and sometimes we can underemphasize it. And we can think, it's just, about my personality or just whatever. But I think that there are certain things that you've been gifted for, that if that is the area that you're going into, to invest in that skill, to build that skill, to get better at something that you do. She did not mess with gossip, or discontent or self-pity. That was a huge self-check for me. Gossiping, being discontent, and feeling sorry for yourself. I'm like, in just these few scriptures, I'm like, it's amazing when you break it down. She was praised and adored by her family. She was excellent. She had a spirit of excellence about her. She took pride in her work. She was God-fearing, reverent, and worshipful. She was well-known and influential in her community. So, those are all things that I feel like as businesswomen, if you wanted to point to scripture and look for something that could be like a guide for you and for, who you're becoming and what your values are and what that looks like, I just would really encourage you to dig in to that Proverbs 31 woman. And really through the Amplified version, that was one of the versions that just really opened my eyes about that. So is there anything you want to say about that, Dakota, before I move on to the top 5?
Oh, it's just so good, Sarah. And I'm over here writing. I mean, I've read, and obviously I'm familiar with the Proverbs 31 woman, but I haven't read it through the Amplified Bible version. So I will definitely be checking that out. But I mean, I have like 10 lines of, just listing off all the qualities and traits you just shared about her. And just so encouraging to know, like you said, there's somebody in the Bible, like this woman's not new.
Right.
She's been around, and God designed her that way. And just really neat to see how we can take that and really put it to practice in our day-to-day life. And Sarah, before you jump into your top 5 tips for time management, for any of the listeners that haven't gotten to listen to the previous episode yet, can you share with them pretty quickly just the business that you're running, and kind of how you came to that business opportunity?
Yeah, sure. So I am a part of a company. I'm a leader in the company, Mary Kay Cosmetics, which I think most people are familiar with because we've been around for decades now, since the 60s. And the reason, honestly, my background, I have no background in sales or coaching or leadership development or anything like that, or cosmetics or skincare. So it's kind of one of those things like I never would have pictured myself doing. But honestly, when it was on my first date with my husband, he looked at me and he said, you need to do Mary Kay. And I thought, isn't that like for old ladies? Like, that's just what I thought of. It's like little old ladies who wore way too much gaudy makeup and knocked on doors and asked people if they want to buy lipstick. And he's like, no, that's not how this goes. He said, my sister, she's got 2 kids at home. She makes a 6-figure income. She drives a free pink Cadillac. And I was like, really? And I mean, I didn't know anybody who did Mary Kay or, drove a pink Cadillac. I'd never even seen one in real life. And so I was like, kind of curious, but at the same time, I was like, I did not go to school for 5 years to sell lipstick. Like, I'm kind of like, I was too cool for school. And he really kept pressing the issue. And I was like, look, I just really don't think I'm interested in that. But because he knew the business and because he knew about the company and because he had seen his sister be successful, he saw in me, he saw in me what the gifts and the talents and the things that God had given me. And he connected it with that opportunity real fast. And he was like, you have to talk to my sister. And I'm like, the last thing I want to do is join your family business or, have somebody try to talk me into doing something I do not want to do. And so we just went back and forth. And then finally he was like, I said, okay, she can text me. Okay. I don't want to talk to her on the phone. She can text me. So she texted me a video from the company, which was just a piece of kind of like, what we would call marketing or whatever, but it was one of the national sales directors in our company at the top of the top. And she was talking about, in this video, she was just talking about the structure of the company. And she was talking about how it was, built on the priorities of God first, family second, and career third. And she talked about, she hardly talked at all about selling skincare and makeup. What she mostly talked about was she talked about managing your finances. She talked about honoring God with your income. She talked about serving other women. She talked about servant leadership. And she talked about, stepping into the greatness that God had called you to, and, and being able to change your life and the lives of other people with a business opportunity. And she talked about the Holy Spirit. And she just like, when I was watching that, I just heard the Lord say, this is it. 3 words. This is it. So in other words, for me, what that was the opportunity that I had been praying and asking God for. And never, God always does this, right? We think we have things figured out. And then he's like curveball, or like, you thought you knew what this looked like, but he has a different way of bringing it. It was the exact thing that I was looking for, but at the same time, I never would have hand selected it for myself. And so before I ever tried the product or anything, I said yes. I just knew. I was like, this may flop. I may not be good at it, whatever. I have no idea how to run a business or sell anything or anything like that. But I knew that God had brought this opportunity to me. And so I just kind of stepped in. It was a huge leap of faith for me. It was $100 to start at the time. And I had $17 in my bank account. So I was like, which was not abnormal. If I had $17 in my bank account today, I would freak out. But back then that was just like, I was like, hey, I'm not in the red. That's awesome. But, call me on Monday and I'll sign up. And so she did, and I did. And, the rest is history. I went really fast and earned a car in my first 5 months and became a sales director, moved into leadership in my first 6 months, replaced my income in the first 2 weeks. And, I just remember being really intentional about taking God as my business partner early on. And I would just encourage people to do that, whatever business opportunity you're walking into, or whatever it is you're creating, or whatever it is that you're serving, whether it's the nonprofit or just in your 4 walls, or an online business, or, direct sales, or, whether you're creating content or you're making stuff, whatever it is that really just intentionally enrolling yourself in God's plan and inviting him to be your business partner. And, that doesn't mean it's always going to be easy, but I can tell you, God has always provided through this opportunity for myself and my family. And so it's just been really awesome. And it's a journey, because I'm telling you guys, I can't, the last time I looked at the statistics, I think it was like only 3% of the population are entrepreneurs, which means like 97% of people work for somebody else. And if you have a desire to be your own boss, or, to step out and do something that you're feeling called to do, like, I would just encourage you to just step out in faith and do it. And to know that you don't have to have the end figured out to get started. But if there's something that's just like stirring in you and it just won't go away, that could be called a call to entrepreneurship, because God uses, he uses people of influence and people in leadership and people who are financially, affluent to run his kingdom, to be used in his kingdom. Like, we all have a place. And so, it's sometimes people are like, how do you think that selling lipstick is a ministry? And I'm like, it is. Like, this is literally my mission field. And so, I'll never forget my pastor saying, after I earned my first car, because I was on staff at a church at the time, went out in my car, and he just came out and he said, I'm just going to tell you, he said, I see God blessing your business, and I think it's so awesome. But he said, you know what else I see? He said, this business of yours is going to put you knee to knee and toe to toe with more women than would ever walk through the doors of this church. And that just kind of like released me to feel like, oh my gosh, like what I'm doing really is significant. You know, and it is powerful, and it can be used by God. So that's kind of how I got started. And, you know, 6 months after I started my business was when Chris and I got married. So it's kind of like a family business around here. You know, my niece, she lives 15 minutes away from me, and she is amazing with her Mary Kay business. She drives a little pink and black Mary Kay Mini Cooper. And my sister-in-law, she is one of a top level in our company of what we call national sales director. So there's less than 200 women in the whole country who have that position, and she's one of them. So obviously she's been an amazing mentor for me. She's been hugely successful. And that was one of the things that I prayed for, you know, before God revealed to me what my opportunity was. I wanted a mentor. I wanted someone in business, and whatever he was calling me to, I wanted someone who had gone before me to kind of take me by the hand and just lead the way. And so she's been a huge gift in that way. And then the position that I hold is kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm a Pink Cadillac sales director with Mary Kay. So I'm at a level of leadership that's like a higher level of leadership in our company, but I still have, we're still working on growing that position and growing that platform. And, you know, it's just really cool to see the women that God brings into your life that, you know, help you achieve the things that he's called you to achieve. And, you know, one thing I would say about whatever it is that you're doing or whatever, you know, you're pursuing, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, what's my purpose or what's my passion. And I promise you guys, whatever your purpose is in life, it will always involve serving other people. Like no matter what God has called you to do, the purpose behind what you're doing will always be, you know, to serve and to reach and to minister to other people. So leadership is a very selfless position. It's a very selfless title, even though you kind of get elevated and you're seen and you're known. You know, it really is all about how many people can I serve, and what can I do in that capacity. So
thank you so much for sharing more of your Mary Kay story. I'm excited for us to dive in really to what you refer to as the meat and potatoes of the business, and your top 5 tips for time management, Sarah.
all right. Yes. So these top 5 tips are just some things that I've learned along the way and things that I've implemented. Some of it's just really practical, and then some of it is a little more theoretical that you can just apply to your own personal strategy. But tip number 1 is on time management is value it. And in other words, you know, we've already talked a little bit about, you know, how important time management is to God. It is one of those gifts from him that just like anything else, just like your talents, just like your income, it is a resource that we're responsible for stewarding. And if you don't, you can tell when people don't value money. You can tell by how they spend it. It's the same with time. You can tell if somebody truly values time or not by how they spend it. And you can also tell what they value when you look at how their time is spent. So if you want to know what is important to a person, just look at their date book. Same thing with their finances. You know, if you look at a person's date book and their bank account, you can really tell where their heart is. You can really tell what they're invested in. And so what you do with the time you've been given says so much about who you are and what's important to you. So I think the first thing is us having to get really intentional about understanding that we have an assignment on our lives. We have an enemy that is in opposition over it, and we have a limited amount of time. And I was listening to a podcast the other day on an app of mine, and it was talking about, there's some kind of app, I wish I could remember what it was called, but anyway, you go in there and you put in like your birth date, you put in your body mass index, or like your weight, your age, all these different little factors, and it projects and it tells you statistically like the likelihood of how long you will live. And then it stays on your phone and it counts down the days to like how long you would be expected to live. And it's right there on your phone. So you see it. It could be a little bit morbid for some people, but I'm like, oh my gosh, like that how would you live different? How would you think differently about time if that clock was ticking right in front of you every time that you looked at your phone? And so I think the first thing for me is learning to value time, because you guys, if what you're doing right now, if you look at, you can ask yourself the question, where do I want to be 5 years from now? And you can write that down and you can say, okay, this is where I want to be. This is what I want my life to look like. These are the things that I want to have and do. And, whatever that is, you can paint that picture for yourself. And then you have to backtrack and ask yourself, is what I'm doing today, if I keep doing what I'm doing right now, will I get there? And if the answer is no, then we have the responsibility to step back and reevaluate, because you guys, either time happens to you or you happen to time. Okay. And I know that that's not like correct English, but you guys know what I mean. Either you're a victim and you're going to wake up 5 or 10 years from now and go, oh my gosh, what happened? And why does my life still look the same? Or you're going to get intentional today and you're going to start making choices that align with not just who you are right now and what you value, but who you are becoming. And that really fall into line and honor the call that God has put on your life, because this is one of those things that nobody else can do for us. Like, this is 100% personal responsibility right here. And so to me, the first thing we've got to do is value time. The second thing is schedule your values. And this is something that I did learn from Craig Groeschel's leadership podcast. But you guys, whatever is most important, that goes on the calendar first. And scheduling your values means that you're owning your time, you're writing your story, you're saying what's important and what I'm giving time to. So basically what matters most goes on the calendar first. One of the things that we learned from the Proverbs woman is her time with God, like her relationship with the Lord. That was a priority to her, that when she honored, empowered her to do all those other things. And that's been a huge thing for me, you guys. It's been such a struggle with having kids. If I could give you one piece of advice in this area of spending time with the Lord, it is wake up before your children. Because for me, if my alarm clock is that little cry that comes, from across the way, or the little feet that run to the side of my bed, I wake up in a reactive state. And then all of a sudden I'm just reacting to everything. It takes me hours and hours. But when I wake up before my kids, when I'm intentional, when I have that time, to myself and with God, whether I'm praying or journaling or reading the word or sitting in silence or listening to worship music, like whatever it is, drinking my coffee, when I have that time, even if it's just 30 minutes, I love my quiet time. I like to block off a full hour, but sometimes that's not realistic. And so whatever time it is, even if it's just 15 or 20 minutes, having that time before your kids wake up, so that when they do wake up, you're already, 1, 2, and 3 steps ahead of them, and you're more intentional. And when you schedule your time and you schedule your values and you kind of have that laid out and everything's not so haphazard and reactive, then you have a plan, and you can kind of map that out and walk that out, and you can execute that day with intention versus just responding to every little thing that happens. And it's a much more powerful thing. It's a much more powerful, intentional way to live. Scheduling your values is health of value for you. Do you make time, to cook healthy food or buy healthy food? Or, are you scheduling time in, to stretch or to go for a walk or to go to the gym or ride a bike, or, whatever your jam is? It could really be anything, but something physical. And are you scheduling time for relationships? I can say that I value my marriage all day long, but if you look at my calendar and there is no time for me and my husband, like scheduled to ourselves, whether that's a date night or, sometimes our favorite thing to do is just get in the car and drive without the kids, just to have that alone time where we can focus and we can talk and we can connect, or time, after the kids go to bed, whatever it is. Like, if that's not on my schedule, I can say that I value my marriage, but am I giving time to it? And so, you can kind of ask yourself those questions. You can look at your calendar right now and tell what do I value based on what I give my time to? And if that doesn't align with the priorities that you truly hold in your heart, that's when you need to reevaluate and move some things around and reprioritize until it does, line up with what you're doing. One of the things I always tell people is, whenever somebody tells me, like in a coaching session or when I'm mentoring somebody, when they say, I just don't have time, I stop them and I say, what you're really saying when we say we don't have time, what you're really saying is it's not important enough. That's saying that I don't have time is a cop out. If it was important, you guys know, if it's important, we make time for it. And so we can't use that excuse in our lives and get to where it is that we want to go. We can't use that excuse in our lives and operate at our highest God-given capacity when we're saying things like that to ourselves. That's a limited belief, and you're deceiving yourself if that's what you're saying, if that's your excuse. So instead of saying, I don't have time, just admit to yourself, it's not important enough. But if you want it to be important enough, then change your schedule and give it some time, assign it some time. If not, then maybe let it go. If it really truly is not that important, let it go. The third thing is say no. Lisa Turkhurst wrote a great book called Your Best Yes. And I think that book was written by a woman because as women, we can be people pleasers. We can be yes women. We can be, we have more of an inclination to serve and to go and to do and to help probably than some men do in general. And so I think for us, saying no can be a really hard thing. But it's an important skill to learn because, a lot of times we have to say no to something good so that we can say yes to something great. And that's kind of what she talks about giving your best yes, is we can't say yes to everything. And just because something is good and it's a worthy cause, or, I would be good at it, or, people, a lot of times when you have leadership skills or when you're successful, people want your time. They ask for it because they know you're going to do a good job, or they know you're going to be great at it. They want you to volunteer. They want you to do this. They want you to do that. But I've had to learn to give myself permission to say, like, look, if this does not bring me closer to my God, my family, or my goals, I give myself permission to say no to it. And that can be really hard because people on the outside looking in, they're not going to understand that because that's not how the average person thinks. And so you can offend a lot of people, but I've had to learn, you guys, that no is a complete sentence. And I don't even owe people an explanation, because when I give an account for the way that I live my life and what I did with the time that I was given, I'm not giving that account to my friends and my family. I'm giving that account to God. And so I'm very protective of my time and what I say yes to, whether that offends people or other people agree with me or they don't agree with me. None of that matters. What matters is, am I being true? And am I honoring what God has called me to do? And the specific assignment that God has put on my life is to be a wife, a mother, and a businesswoman. And so I can look at those priorities and those things that He's given to me and give myself permission to say no to a lot of other things. And it really is liberating. So learning to say no. The fourth thing is be present. This, you guys, I know I can't remember the movie, that cartoon movie, but it's the quote that something along the lines of like, it's a gift. They call it the present because it's a gift or something like that. But being present truly is like the greatest gift that you can give to people in your life. I've had to learn as a mom to really compartmentalize my business and my family and my marriage, because I don't want to spend time when I'm spending time with my kids, I don't want to be working from my phone or have my head buried in my phone. Trust me, you guys, I've done it. And you talk about frustrated. When I'm with my kids and I feel like I need to work, I'm frustrated and I take it out on my kids. Right. And I'm like, blame my kids. And I'm like, if y'all just would get out of the way, like I could really work. I could really get something done. And then when I'm working and my kids are outside the door, they're crying, or whatever it is, then I feel guilty. You have that mom guilt of like, I'm working too much, or, I'm working and my kids want to be with me. And, so, I feel like you really can feel pulled in those different directions. So I've had to learn to really to compartmentalize those parts of my lives and to schedule off time. As a mom, if I could give you advice, when we built our house, my husband and I, we both work from home. So we both have big, nice, beautiful offices in our home. I've got French doors, glass French doors that lead to my office. And I'm telling you guys, with 2 kids, they don't care if I'm working. They don't care if I'm on a conference call. They don't care if I'm coaching somebody or I have somebody in my office. If they see me through those glass doors, they're going to come in. They're going to want me. And so I have childcare here to help me in the mornings at home, through all this COVID stuff when I couldn't go anywhere. But I've had to learn, like, I work best when I'm away from my kids. So that's why sometimes, even though I have this nice office, I will go to the coffee shop or I'll meet one of my friends somewhere and we'll just sit down and power hour and work together for a little while, because I can get so much more done when I'm not looking at those sad little faces or they're crying. And, they don't do that to their daddy. He has glass doors to his office too, but they want mommy. And so I've had to learn, to really schedule and block my time off so that I can honor and be fully present where I'm at. When my husband and I go out to dinner, we don't have our phones, because it's so tempting when you own your business or you work from home to not have set business hours, to like always be on. And, I know how it makes me feel when I want him or his attention or talk to him and he's on his phone. And same thing with me when I'm on my phone. So I feel like we have to really guard ourselves. It's different than a 9 to 5 when you just leave and you clock out and you come home and you can kind of turn things off. But when you own the business, it feels different. And so I think we have to be really intentional about setting those boundaries that allow us to be present with the people that we're with, whether it's you're being present with my business, being present with my children, my husband, my family, wherever I am and whatever I'm doing in that moment, to be able to give my full attention, my heart, my mind, my body language, everything in that moment is a really powerful gift that you can give to people. And the 5th thing, you guys, is empowering other people. Another word for this is delegation. We see the Proverbs woman do it. We see her wake up early. We see that she has already laid out all the tasks for the women that are servants in her home, that basically are her employees. We see her delegating. She doesn't do everything. And that's something that I've learned, and the things that we can say no to is delegating things, even though somebody may not fold the towels exactly the way that I do or the way that I like. I have somebody else here that can fold the towels, because it doesn't matter who folds them or who washes my husband's socks and underwear, as long as it gets done, right? Or who does the dishes. But that was one thing that I was encouraged to do, was to bring somebody into my home that could do those things that really they're important. They have to get done, but they're not moving me any closer to my goal. And so depending on what level you are in your business or where you're working or how much you're working, the higher you go, the more you will delegate. The higher you go, the less you will do, the less you should do. Like, your job description should basically get more as you go up. Like, think of it like a pyramid. The higher you go, your job description should get more and more and more narrow, and should become more and more and more focused, which means you're doing less things, but you're having a higher impact. And so, for me early on in my business, that looked like getting somebody to help me clean the house. Then it looked like, having some virtual assistants. Then it looked like having, somebody in my office just a couple days a week to help me with the little tedious things, that I was doing, and little paperwork. I try to not touch paper as much as I can. And I try to pour my energy and my time into what moves the needle of my organization, which is people. So the less time I can spend cleaning house and doing paperwork and all those things that need to be done and have to be done, it gives me more time to have a higher impact where I'm the most influential. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But empowering other people and delegating other people, and when you're making those decisions of who's going to do what, look for people that really thrive in that area. So the lady that I have that comes into my home, she loves my kids, like adores my kids. I swear she spends half her paycheck on my children, just bringing them stuff and buying them stuff. But, and I prayed for her. I prayed, because I was like, God, I don't want just anybody in my home. And then when it came to sending Savvy to school, just praying over that, God, where are we going to send her? Connect us with the right people, with the right places. I promise you that God will resource you, because there are people who are gifted. There are people in your life who are gifted to do the things that you're not gifted to do, or that you need to release so that you can operate in your gifting. And that's why it's so great that we're not all good at the same things, but look for people who thrive in those areas. My mentor always told me, work in your strengths and hire out your weaknesses. And that was really good advice. And, sometimes it takes a step of faith or boldness, because you're like, ooh, people aren't going to work for free. You got to pay them. So
Yep.
when you delegate things, there has to be a dollar behind it. But if your vision is big enough for the future, you see that that's an investment. I'm investing in that person. I love that. I am so passionate about shopping local. I am so passionate. I try every ounce of business that I do that I can do local, I do local, because it matters to me. And I love being able to pour into other people. Before I started my business in college, I was waiting tables. I was cleaning houses. I was working for entrepreneurs. The people who hired me were people who had businesses, people who had money, that could afford whatever service or whatever skill I was hustling at the time. That's who I depended on. And now, as an entrepreneur, I get to be that person. I get to be that person who operates from a place of affluence, and I get to bless people, and I get to create opportunities for other people to work and operate in their gifts. And so I used to kind of feel guilty about that, almost like, when you kind of have a poverty mentality and you start making really great income, sometimes I would feel guilty for having the things that I have. But what God has showed me is like, no, this is, you're blessed to be a blessing. And me being able to afford to hire other people and me being able to delegate things is not just a blessing to me and my family, but it's a blessing also to that person. And so learning to delegate, learning to empower other people, even in leadership, not doing everything. I could do everything for my kids if I wanted to, but I would rather empower them. Same thing with the people you're leading or the people you're delegating to. So those are really my top 5 tips. I hope that was helpful.
Oh my gosh, it was absolutely helpful, Sarah. And I mean, I've got 2 pages of notes here. It's just like writing as fast as I possibly could. And I have a couple more questions for you, some that the listeners had sent in, but I do want to say, just on that very last one, when you were talking about, empowering others and delegating, I too, and I think there's probably so many women listening that have had the struggle of, well, what are people going to think if I pay somebody to come clean my house? Whether you're, work from home mom or stay at home mom, or just a mom and a wife and you have a full-time job, there is something there. And I don't know why we are wired this way, but I struggled with that as well. And now, just like you said, I mean, I prayed about it and I was like, okay, God, like, let there be, let me find the right person that can fit our budget, that can be a blessing in our home. And I have help. And I think some of it is just not being afraid to say, I have help. And yes, I pay somebody to come dust because I hate to dust, like, those kind of things. And it's okay, how we choose to spend our money, that's personal, but at the same time, I think sometimes if we just shared a little bit more with each other, that it's like, sister, if that brings you joy because you don't have to wash those clothes and you can pour into the lives of others, then don't be afraid or ashamed to share that. Like, that's a good thing. So I really appreciate you just sharing all those tips. I'm really excited to dig more into learn about the Proverbs 31 woman. And one of the main questions I got in a lot of different versions from our listeners, but Sarah, what is some advice you can give to us about, you're managing your time, and whether you're trying to time block or you're planned out a schedule, when reality sets in and you have a sick kid, or your husband needs you at the last minute to come help him with a project, how do you shift, how do you pivot, and what kind of boundaries do you set to make sure that that's not happening and you're always setting your business to the side in order to take care of that stuff? Do you have any tips for us?
Yes, girl, that is really such a powerful question and such a good question. One of the things that I do, I have what I call a weekly plan sheet, and you can just Google it and Google image it, and it will come up. It is basically just a sheet of paper that has Sunday through Saturday on it. And then it has the times, like, starting it, whether you start your day at 5 o'clock in the morning and you go till 9 o'clock in the evening, whatever it is. But hold on just a second. I'm taking a note because there's something just popped into my head. But having that in my typically my weeks, my ideal week looks the same. And I'm careful to call it an ideal week because let's be honest, especially when you have children, it will never execute perfectly. And so if you're waiting for perfection, sloppy success is better than perfect procrastination. Don't put it off because your expectation is perfection. Go into it understanding. When I write my weekly plan sheet, I usually try to just do one, but I often have to evaluate it every 2 or 3 months because, something has shifted or changed. But that's just kind of like a skeleton. This is like, if this was my ideal week, on Mondays look like this, Tuesdays I know look like this, Wednesdays look like this. And then I go in and I time block and I highlight the different areas of time. There's like 5 different things that I allow myself or give myself permission to give my time to. And so then I assign those different things to my week, and each of them has a color. So when I look at that weekly plan sheet, I know that the things that are in pink is my office time. I'm either going to be on the phone or, talking to somebody or meeting with somebody. If it's blue, that's family time. I know I've got a date night that night, or, me and the kids are doing something special that weekend, or, whatever it is. Like I can look at that. Orange is like my quiet time or my personal time. So if I'm going to go for a walk or a run, or I'm going to, wake up early and have some quiet time with the Lord, whatever it is, like I can look at that sheet and I've already told my time where to go. Kind of like Dave Ramsey tells us to tell our dollar where to go or it'll just disappear. We've got to tell our time where to go or it will just disappear. So I look at that, and that's how I build my day and my week, is off of that nutshell. So if you can kind of have something, if your weeks can look the same, I have some people that have 2 because their weeks alternate. And so like weeks, 1 and 3 look the same, and weeks 2 and 4 look the same. So they might have 2 and they know which one to go off of. Another thing is helping whoever is in your life that is affected most by your time, your husband, your kids, your family, whoever it is, helping them. We have a family calendar that stays on the bar in the kitchen, and I write all of my stuff down on that. If I have an appointment or, and my husband knows, like we have a little meeting on Sundays where we get our coffee, we put the kids in front of the TV, let them watch cartoons, but we get in our office together and we go over the week. And he's like, this is what I've going on. This is what you've got going on. I'm like, where do you need me? And where do I need him? And so we give ourselves time to each other first, as far as like, if he needs my help or I need his help, or, if the kids have a special appointment or anything like that, we try to look at that stuff before it happens, because then it, will sneak up on you. You're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So really being proactive about that, enrolling your family in your calendar and being enrolled in theirs ahead of time can kind of help head some of that stuff off. So those are 2 things that I would do. And then especially like not, like I said, your expectation for the execution of what you have scheduled cannot be perfection. We have to learn to roll with the punches. And 2 of the things that I have been taught by mentors in my business that I'll share with your listeners that I hope really helps them, that has really helped me in those moments, because when something frustrates you, or it's one thing to have a plan, but when the plan doesn't go as planned, we have to emotionally manage that disappointment or that frustration. And so for me, the way that I'm proactive about how I'm going to respond in those moments is there's 2 prayers that I've learned to pray. And Dakota, I literally get out my date book or my phone or wherever you run your calendar from, and I lay my hands on it and I pray over it. And I promise you, it may sound corny, it may sound silly, but it works. But I pray over my calendar usually once a week at the beginning of the week, but every day I pray. One is like a prayer of surrender, and it's basically just, God, everything that I have devoted my time to, everything that is written down in this calendar, everything that is on my schedule, everything that I've given my time to, every person that I'm pouring into, I just surrender that all to you right now. I pray that it honors you. I pray that it falls into line with what you've called me to do. And if something needs to switch or to change, help me to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit, to know when to give my time, when to give my energy, where to put my focus. In the name of Jesus, I just surrender it. Whatever it is, I surrender it to you. And that is kind of like when you surrender, it's just like a release. It's like, okay, this takes the pressure off of me and allows me to work in submission to and in alignment with what God's called me to do. The second prayer, really quick, but it's just a prayer of enough. And basically, I just say, God, I'm asking you for everything that you have for me today, nothing more and nothing less. And what praying that prayer has allowed me to do is, a lot of times I feel like as entrepreneurs, we can lay our head on the pillow at night and feel like I did not do enough. I didn't do enough. And, there's still more to do. And on days when I pray this prayer and I just say, Lord, I just want everything that you have for me today, nothing more and nothing less. It never fails. When I lay my head on the pillow at night, my day is done. Like, I rest. I'm not worried about what did get done or what didn't get done. And so I hope that kind of answers your question. I know those are a little more like proactive things, but they really affect how I'm able to respond in the moment when those shifts happen. And they help me to be less frustrated, and it helps me to kind of listen to the Lord first a little bit more, as opposed to just reacting in the moment and trying to make a split decision.
So good, Sarah. Thank you so much for just sharing all your knowledge and wisdom and practical, advice with us and these strategies. I really like to just wrap it up asking everybody, what does the phrase cowgirl state of mind mean to you? Because we have listeners that have maybe never had the opportunity to throw their leg over a horse, but then we also have people like you and I that have grown up in the industry that are still very involved in it in different capacities. So what does that phrase mean to you?
When you first asked me that question, the phrase just whatever it takes is what came into my mind. And, that was a value that was instilled in me from the time I was young is, when you have something in front of you, whether it's a task or a goal or a dream or whatever, that cowgirl state of mind is honestly like, you take ownership and whatever it takes to complete what's in front of you. Like, that's just what you do. And you don't complain about it. You don't gripe about it. You find joy in it. Cowgirls, when I look back at, being raised around horses and the responsibility that it taught you, the grit that it instilled in you, that expectation that's put upon you to take care of business and to get things done. It's a great thing to instill in your kids, because those are things that we carry when we, as we go throughout life and into business and relationships and whatever it is. And, something that Chris and I work hard to, instill into our kids. And, we will instill that into them with responsibility and with, the things that come hand in hand with, living on a ranch and, being a part of rodeo and what we do, and in business. But, to me, I just think, whatever it takes to get the job done, whatever it takes to do what I've been called to do, whatever it takes to master what's in front of me, like that cowgirl mentality, those things from my childhood. I just feel like that's where the grit comes from, and it's not like this ill-fitting burden. It's like a pleasure, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of pride in that, and being able to work that way and think that way. And it's definitely a gift that my parents gave me. So.
Oh, I love your answer, and just, I love it all, whatever it takes. And Sarah, could you share with everybody where they can go to find you on social media and follow along? Or, hey, if they don't have a Mary Kay consultant and they are needing some makeup, how they can get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. So on Instagram, I'm the Sarah Neal, and on Facebook, you can just search me, Sarah Neal. And my website, you can shop with me 24/7, is marykay.com/Sarah Neal. But yeah, those are pretty much my main platforms: Facebook, Instagram. And if you want, I do have a private beauty group that I add my customers to, with all kinds of fun tutorials and just extra little stuff that you get to see in my home and in my life. So it's a fun little group. It's a great community of women who, like to look pretty and feel pretty and be transparent and learn about each other. So it's a cool place. You can be a part of that too if you want.
Awesome. I'll make sure and link those things in the show notes. Sarah, thank you again for just being such a gift to us here on this podcast and sharing your story as well as these different, business strategies and tips. I'm just so grateful for you and looking forward to, working together more in the future.
Absolutely. Me too, Dakota. Keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for spending your time with me on the Cowgirl Confessions podcast. I'm so glad y'all stopped by. If you could take a moment to share this episode and tag us on social media, I'd be happier than a cowgirl in a sea of buy one, get one vintage turquoise. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. New episodes will be released bi-monthly. Please leave us a review if you feel so led by going to iTunes. Your feedback will really help us breed the idea of grabbing life by the horns with a cowgirl state of mind into women across the globe. Some that may have never even had the privilege to throw their leg over a horse, but could most certainly use the cowgirl state of mind while navigating life. Thanks again, y'all. Until next time, keep pursuing your dreams with that all go and no woe mentality. Remember, you're writing a story that's worth saddling up for, sister.